Recipe Part 8 Meat. John stepped into the kitchen and approached Norbert's cold, pink frame that lay on the bench. It no longer resembled the Beaver John loved, but he still felt Norbert's presence around it. He selected a short knife from the holder by the oven, as well as a large steel bowl from under the bench, and began cutting the flesh from Norbert's legs and back. The razor-sharp knife made easy work slicing through flesh. John worked with precision, leaving as little behind as he could, and removed a satisfyingly large slab of dark red meat from Norbert's leg. "Perfect," he smiled, placing it in the bowl. John continued cutting the rest of the meat from Norbert's body until the bowl was full, leaving an almost bare skeleton in a thin pool of blood on the cold steel bench. John covered the bowl with a layer of food wrap and placed it in the fridge. What remained of Norbert was wasted. The head still remained virtually untouched, but no part of it was of any real use. John looked at the two long, sharp teeth that protruded from the end of Norbert's long, pointed, sexy nose, and couldn't help but want to remove them. After raiding the laundry utility closet for tools, John returned with a pair of pliers and a clean cloth to begin his first attempt at teeth extraction. With the cloth wrapped around the teeth for protection, John gripped them with pliers and pulled as hard as he could. At first it seemed like a losing battle, but after a few more tries, they began to wiggle. With a hard twist and a sickening crunch that by now John was accustomed to hearing, they finally came out. John washed them under the tap and sat them on the windowsill. John's shirt was heavy with beaver blood. It hung like dead weight on his shoulders, clinging wetly to his body. After dropping the last of Norbert's remains in the hole outside and backfilling it, he stripped out of his sticky clothes and dropped them by Daggett's mutilated body with a slop. After a lengthy, hot shower in the communal washroom and a fresh white shirt and jeans, John went to the kitchen and made himself a late breakfast of eggs, toast, and coffee. John walked down the hall into his bedroom, where Norbert met his end. The floor was covered in blood and vomit around the side of the bed, which was also blotted with dark patches and smears of Norbert and John's own blood, from when he was beaten on the neck. John rubbed his bandage lightly. The thought of the bite made it itch. The bedsheets were ruined. John pulled them off the bed and used them to wipe as much blood off the floor as he could before taking them outside, dumping them by Daggett and his soiled clothes. After digging a deep enough hole, John pushed the sheets and clothes into the ground with the spade, followed by the messy mound of brown fur and mashed flesh that was once Norbert's brother. He felt sorry for Daggett as he tossed dirt over the body. John had no real explanation for what he had done, and although he felt sorry, he did not regret his actions. Selecting a mop and bucket of warm handy from the laundry, John proceeded to clean the polished wooden floor of his bedroom and the rest of the lodge. As the blood was relatively fresh, it came off easily. In no time at all, the floors were returned to their original dull state. John went to the bathroom to check on Norbert's fur. Soaking seemed to have loosened most of the blood. He took a bottle of shampoo from the edge of the tub and began working it into the furs one by one. John drained the dirty water and ran the hot and cold into it again for another wash. The warm water made for easier washing, and soon the furs returned to their natural golden yellow brilliance. He drained the tub again and rinsed the light pink bubbles away from the shower hose. John pressed the water from the furs and loaded them into his arms. The underside of them felt grossly slimy, which John tried his best to ignore. Apart from the shampoo, they smelled deliciously like Norbert should. He carried them to the deck beyond the living area and spread them out in the sun to dry. John wasn't usually an avid chef. He rarely made the effort to fix himself a proper meal, but this occasion warranted more than just a little effort on John's part. It would be the meal of Norbert's life. He had never cooked beaver meat before, so he did as he would do any time he had no idea how to do something. Google it. In the search box, John typed beaver recipe. Many results listed on the screen, but one titled Beaver Stew caught his eye. John read the description and found his mouth watering. That's the one. As his usual diet consisted of frozen and canned meals to avoid having to keep stock of fresh food, he had practically none of the listed ingredients on hand. A trip into town was required. The website also read, Beaver needs to be soaked overnight in salt water to remove blood from the meat. John printed the list of ingredients required to stew an adult beaver and turned off the computer. In the kitchen, he selected a large soup pot from under the bench and filled it with water and a generous amount of table salt. Once it was half full, John transferred the bowl of meat from the fridge into the pot of salt water, putting it back in the fridge until tomorrow. John pocketed the list of ingredients and took the keys from the small phone table that stood in the hall before locking up. In a gravel space behind the lodge, John's car sat covered in leaves and moss. He opened the door of the old black Honda Integra and started the engine. A small cloud of blue smoke billowed from the exhaust pipe as it purred into life for the first time in weeks. After 2 miles of gravel track, the rural highway revealed itself. John turned right, heading north towards the nearest town. John thought as he drove along the long, winding road about Norbert. His actions were a bit harsh, even for him. Did I really have to kill Norbert? John wondered. I don't know what came over me. The beating, the torment. All I wanted was just to spend the night with him. I should have known. I just wanted him so badly. I love that fucking beaver. He's my reason. I've just been so wound up about him for so long, I almost felt like I needed to hurt him for the torment he put me through. I resented him. Not that it was his fault, of course, he was innocent. I had to do it. I couldn't live knowing Norbert was out there waiting for me. I knew he wouldn't want me and that I'd have to coerce him, but I didn't want to kill him. So poetic. Now, I'm going to eat him. John's thoughts twisted and turned like the road until he reached the small village. He drove slowly down the main road past the small shops until he reached the town's only supermarket. To big city folk, it would seem the size of a dairy, but it was good enough for this small town. John pulled into the entrance and found a park. He pulled the trolley from outside the door and strolled inside. Old-time rock and roll played over the tiny PA system, and the floor was bustling with typical weekday shoppers. Moms with babies and unemployed teenagers. John consulted his list as he walked. 3 cups cubed beaver meat from legs. Check. Flour. Salt and pepper. 1 medium onion chopped. 1 cup of chopped celery. 2 bay leaves crushed. 1/4 TSP savory, carrots diced, potatoes cubed, turnip cubed, cabbage, fresh rolls, cornstarch. John made quick work of locating the required goods, taking generous quantities of each. Along the way, he also stocked up on things, foods he'd been missing most while stuck way out in the woods. Bananas, yogurt, shapes, chocolate, V8 juice, hot dogs, and another 5 boxes of Saltham bran with enough milk powder to mix. John trundled to the checkout and unloaded the contents of his trolley onto the conveyor.
Hey there!
The young blonde checkout woman gushed enthusiastically.
Good day,
John greeted, smiling back warmly, and began loading his groceries into the countertop. Shopping at the supermarket always put John in a good mood. It usually meant there was excellent food to be had that night, which was particularly true on that day.
That's $142.
John counted out the cash and got his change.
Thanks, hon. Have a nice day,
she obliged cheerily.
No worries. See ya,
replied John shyly as he left. After loading the truck and returning the trolley, he walked across the road to the liquor shop for a nice bottle of Merlot to go with his special dinner. John arrived back at the lodge after 3 p.m. and parked the car around the back. He unpacked the groceries and stowed them in their appropriate places, screwed up the plastic bags and stuffed them in a cupboard with all the rest. In the bathroom, John removed the bandage on his neck and examined the wound. It seemed to be okay. He let it breathe for a minute and made the coffee before redressing it. He sat on the deck chair outside and sipped on his coffee and watched the glossy yellow furs ruffle in the breeze. John couldn't help himself. He placed his coffee on the deck. Placed his coffee on the deck and crawled over to the furs and stroked them. They were still slightly damp. John rested his face on what was once Norbert's hair and closed his eyes, imagining Norbert and smelling his scent. He began to get an erection as he stroked the cool, silky hair and kissed it. John sighed and rolled onto his back and lay in the sun for a while, thinking of Norbert's smiling face.
Norbert, Beaver,
he whispered slowly, with longing.